Good evening. Welcome to WooTube. How's everyone doing? I'm pretty excited. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty excited. We have all the new cards, and today we're gonna talk about them. We might play some games, but I'm not totally sure that they're all up on JNet yet. I'm like I have Jinteki open here, and I'm just keeping an eye in case it suddenly goes like mental. But I have a plan for something else in the meantime anyway, because I figured we could go through the cards, and then I've made a Excel spreadsheet, um, which I'm going to do an incredibly fancy tier list, but purely based on how exciting I think the decks are to make, how exciting I think the cards are to make decks out of. So it's not really going to be their power level. I know that I'm sure that Audrey's going to cover that with Yasengrin and make a completely definitely correct version. I just need to kind of make this doable, right? So I guess I need to kind of select so that you can see this. So if I change this one here to this, hey, and then maybe we'll just shimmy my face over a little bit. Oh, that's not my face, is it? We'll move this over here. Bam. And I'll quickly explain kind of what we're going to look at here. So I'll kind of fill this in, and we'll pop back to it every now and then. But essentially, I'm just going to be obviously jotting down the card name and faction, and then the fun bit is the third or fourth column along here, the tier ranking, where this is purely how excited am I to build decks with these cards. How excited do I think you should be to build decks with these cards? And then in this last little column here, I'm also going to make a little note of what deck I think the cards actually fit into. Because we got some brand new stuff to talk about as well, stuff which came out today, including one card which I think is incredibly potentially busted and will probably cause a riot at some point. And then because it's an Excel spreadsheet, then we can kind of play around with it and maybe organize it into some kind of way that we can work out, which is, well, probably what the next like 6 weeks of WooTube looks like, to be fair. But yeah, right. This I was hoping was going to go back to this is probably all fine. I can make this work. This is not like Chopbot like invading things again. By the way, straight up big shout out to Mike Manverupt. Mike, basically, he sent me a very nice message early sort of last week, saying firstly that he was really sorry that he couldn't give me any scoops at all, and I was fine with that. That's, it was a shame, but these things, basically he explained that because they had right, this should work now, maybe not, because he had sort of lots of cards which had the new like threat mechanic on them. They were like very tricky to actually be able to give out to anyone who wasn't already part of Nisei and kind of knew what was going on with those things. So but he did promise that I'd get scoops for the next season, which I was like very excited about. And then just as I finished my stream last Monday, I got a little message from Mike saying, do you want some scoops? Because it just so happened that essentially someone who was meant to be scooping some of the cards, which I had decided that they would rather concentrate on specifically sort of just a couple of the cards that they had, and so I ended up swinging myself some scoops and had a lot of fun. I'm sure you've probably already seen the video, but yeah, I had an absolute blast putting together some puzzles and kind of essentially teasing the hell uh, out of UK Slack for the day. Okay, so now I believe this should work. If I click on here, maybe I have to what's it called? Window Capture 2? Sorry, I'm definitely not doing stuff like putting stuff together as we go. Oh, here we go. Let's go with Control Alt Show and then Control Alt Hide, and we'll apply that and we'll see if that works. That's on this screen. Boom, boom. Yes, score. Absolutely nailed it. All right, so let's have a little look at these cards, shall we? Hopefully. Oh, also, I noticed in Netrunner DB, there's been a few additional things added, including if you open up the Sets tab, Netrunner DB running a little slowly tonight, probably because there's a million people on it going, "What do I do with these cards?" So maybe I can't show you this, but yeah, if you open up the Sets tab now, there's this really rather nice. I'm pretty sure this wasn't here before. I'm like 90% sure that this has just appeared, but there's it shows you standard startup and it's what is legal, which I think is a really useful little tool to be quite honest, because particularly when you're kind of wanting to explain rotation and startup and standard to newer players. I think that's a very nice inclusion. I was trying to drag my window over there, but can't do that, so that's absolutely fine. I just won't. Okay, so let's have a look at the cards in this set. We kind of can go through them in order. We'll adjust things as we go. So we have card number 1, Strike Fund. This is, and then if I do this, like, does this then work? Yeah, it did. Look at that. So we've got Strike Fund, which is an Anarch card. It's card number 1. It's a card that I spoiled. Am I excited to play with it? Is the real big question. Kind of not. Like, I think it's a good card. I think it's a perfectly fine card. But this is probably going to be a kind of it's going to slot well into certain decks like Esser and things like that. But it's not super interesting, is it? It's just econ at the end of the day. So I think this is like a 1 based on my system. I've done it in numbers. I'll change it into like letters, but this way we can add points like decimals and things like that. Do yell at me if you completely disagree, because I do enjoy a good rousing argument over sort of card interest. I think the main deck that this goes in is like Esser decks now. I mean, it's good with most Anarchs, but I think particularly Esser and particularly Startup Esser. Let's put that. That's where I'd like actually definitely want to put this straight into, because we've got a little bit more. We've got a little bit more tempo. We've got a little bit more kind of just straight up econ. We're probably playing a Ghost Tongue, so we can play this for free if we actually have to play it from our hand. That feels like the sort of the perfect home for this deck right here. I really want to be able to like move this window. I'm gonna try one more time, because I'd love to have it on my second screen, but it's apparently like not really wanting to do that. So maybe it's not going to happen. Okay, fine. That's absolutely fine. So card number 2 is, we can script across with this one here. The price. This has been described by some people as the best, or the best Anarch card, I think, in the set. I think it's pretty interesting. It's basically a bit of a kind of gachapon slash street peddler kind of thing going on. Maybe I guess street peddler without kind of maybe knowing as much in advance, but you do get more of a discount. I feel like this is potentially a very powerful card as long as you build around it a bit. Source says he's been too tired to probably follow Scoops, so I'm ready. Yeah, I'm just gonna go through, tell you what's fun, Source, and then you can just play with that. Mela wonders, now that the bin breakers are gone, how happy people will be tracking cards. It's a good question, and I think it's one which is kind of interesting because people played Max for years and kind of didn't care about trashing a lot of cards. I mean, many times Max played things like Buffer Drive in bad versions, or Levy, or things like that. But I think actually just finding the card that you need in a situation and maybe even installing it for less is actually usually a very good thing. And outside of playing against, I guess, like PE, then it's probably not a huge issue. Yeah, I think Simulchip could be a very important card in Anarch, as Source mentions, because there's a lot of kind of self-mill, and Simulchip really helps with that. It kind of actually turns it into almost a benefit because you're just pulling cards from your deck, kind of by putting them into the bin. So we've got the price. This is another Anarch card. I think this is kind of fun, and also I kind of want to play this a bit in Shaper. Could be actually pretty fun there. So we're gonna go with like a 3, like a C tier kind of or B tier kind of card. I think it's powerful enough. I think it's kind of fun. The deck, I mean, good stuff. Anarch is the boring answer. It's not what I want to play it in. I kind of want to play it in Shaper. Just like kind of good stuff install Shaper. Install all the things. So I guess like I'm just going to put good stuff Shaper because I don't think it's like a specific Shaper thing, but getting through your stuff quicker feels like really good in Shaper, and you've got symbol chips to get stuff back. I don't think this comes out in Creme, apart from maybe like Steve decks. But yeah, you're probably it's probably a bit too risky in Creme, but we shall see. Maybe like if we went real jank, we could go like Buffer Drive or something like that. I feel like that's the jank contender right there. If we were going to play it in Anarch. Okay. So next up we have Solidarity Badge, which I think is absolutely sick. Whenever this loads, there we go. This was a card I got to spoil, and I think this is pretty great, especially as it just turns certain Anarchs which aren't at the top right now into very, very far more, makes them far more compelling. So like Freedom gets a massive boost from this, and Loop potentially gets a big boost from this, as do like maybe Shapers that are playing Imp, which I think Imp could be like a pretty big card right now. Either way, I'm like really excited to play this. It's maybe not quite a 5 because I think it's mostly going to be like I just really want to play Freedom with this card. Startup Loot is a great shout as well. because there's certain cards in here which I'm more eager to play in startup than in anything else, and we'll get to them. But yeah, sort of startup blue again. Maybe even like big deck. Can we play? We could possibly even play. I'll tell you what. There's some interesting draw, and there's a lot of self mill, and Anarch actually has a lot of recursion in startup. So I think there might be now like a big deck. It's like startup big deck Anarch, possibly loop. Startup big deck Anarch. Because I think you like with a load of tools that we've got, you can actually get through your deck pretty fast. And then we can kind of pull stuff back with retrieval runs and with the what's it called? The run and get a recursion card. Anyway, I think there might be like a pretty fun deck there where we build like a 65 card loop deck. Maybe it's got 3 world trees in it. Who knows? PE not really a thinking startup though. No, but just playing big decks is sometimes quite fun. Or I at least find it pretty fun. So that is Solidarity Badge. Next up, this is my kind of silly card. It's got hilariously disturbing art. It's also a little Shop of Horrors like reference. Audrey version 2. This I'm really excited to play. I'm super excited to play it in Freedom, and with and potentially in some like startup Anarchs, and sort of leaning on this quite heavily. I'm wondering, like my brain is already kind of wondering what if we can do this out of faction, because that's always the things which really get me kind of most interested are the cards which we can kind of splash out of faction and be a bit surprising there. I'm not totally sure we can. I mean, the place I'd want to try it is probably Shaper again, like maybe with like imps, and because then we can pull it. But I wonder if we can do something a bit funky in Criminal with Steve. Probably not. It does seem to be quite exclusively like built to be an Anarch card. It could be quite good in Essa as well, which would be like kind of interesting, because Essa normally kind of doesn't really want to play many breakers, doesn't have the money to play breakers, and this kind of doesn't use money to break things. So I think maybe Essa, probably startup Essa, would be like where I'll be looking around those lines, and then just like a freedom build, probably a freedom build that just plays this card as its breaker, and like maybe this and bank. I guess that's like a lot of cards from hand, but like just this and some botuluses and then maybe some other tricks and stuff like that. Maybe we go full AI. Let's just go like freedom, full AI freedom, so we can play like God of War. Don't ask me what happens if we get purged. It just won't happen. Okay, so full AI freedom. So that's like God of War, Audrey, and an Amakua and Nobkari, and and some Botulus. Done. That's a deck right there. I'm now slightly more excited. I'm putting that at 4.5 just because I really like freedom. Sick. Okay. Banner is interesting, and is particularly interesting for one specific deck that I have in mind, and I think I saw someone else kind of mentioning it earlier. and it is a Persephone deck. So Persephone, if you're not familiar with this is apparently an icebreaker. It's not. No one ever uses it to break ice. It's 2 memory, which is an issue, and it costs 5 to install, which is an issue. And it's got awful numbers on it. It's strength 1, but ignore all of that. It says, whenever you pass a sentry after encountering it, you may trash the top card of your stack. If you do, trash 1 card from the top of R&D for each subroutine on that sentry that resolved during that encounter. Now, I just want to read this here. Yes, perfect. So, Banner says, so you have to interface it. It's strength 5. 2 credits. Subroutines on the barrier you are encountering cannot end the run for the remainder of this encounter. So we can play like the one issue. So I've played Persephone decks in the past, and I've played them with Palangi usually. I've played them in the past with things like Tinkering. I think Egret is probably going to be like a pretty hot include right now, and we'll maybe get onto that at some point. But the big problem is that if the ice that they put out is just end run subs, then you can't really do anything with it. Like if they put out a not a former carry, the other one, an envelopment, for instance, that's got 5 subroutines, which would normally be really good in a Persephone deck, but you can't let them fire because it just ends a run. Apparently Persephone doesn't work with Palangi, in which case I probably have to apologize to various people that I've played in the past. User's ability, the ice you're encountering gains that subtype for the remainder of the encounter. And this says when you may trash the top card when you pass. Yeah, source barrier does not equal sentry, but that's why we're going to turn it into a sentry. I was going to say with Palangi, but clearly not, because that's not. Mum has come in here and pointed out a massive problem with that. But what we can play is we can play Egret, and we can turn the barriers into sentries. I mean, this turns it into everything. And then we can let the end run subs fire whilst paying 2 so that they don't actually end the run. And all of a sudden, that's absolutely fine. That's not, Mum. I'm glad you told me before I started doing this to people on JNet Casual. Now I'll use Egret instead. And I think that's probably going to be what I was going to do anyway, because we have some support for this card now. Yeah, Banner still works because Egret says it's a barrier, a code gate, and a sentry. Haha. So it's all free, and Palangi just gives it the extra sub. So Persephone will, like, when we get past it, we've technically let like however many end run subs it has fire, and then we like mill like 4 cards by milling 1 off the top of our stack, or we install like 3 Persephones. I don't know where we're getting the MU for that, but anyway, Banner. Is this Anarch or Arasana? Yasengrin, it's a really good question. Don't know yet. I'm probably going to try both. Like, Anarch also has the benefit that we can play Bankar, which is just like incredible with Persephone. If you haven't like tried the Bankar Persephone thing going on, we've also now, like, it's probably going to be Anarch because we've also now got Hush, so we can even let Anansi fire, which was always a massive problem before. It's not like the best because they get to rearrange the top of R&D, so they can kind of control what's being milled. But if you're like milling them for like 14 cards, then you know there's only so much you can actually deal with that. So anyway, it's probably going to be Anarch, just because I think you probably want the other stuff that you've got available here. We need a ton of MU, so we're going to need like Keiko or something like that, and we're probably going to need Keiko just so that we can afford to install this stuff. But either way, Banner does allow us to do this with barriers, which is something that we haven't been able to do, or with end the run subs even. And for that reason, it's getting a 4. So this is going in Persephone deck, Persephone deck. It's also potentially a good card for Mercury, which I can't spell Mercury at all. There, what is going Mercury? Something like that. Which is hilarious because we'll talk about a blue card which came out today, which might be the better option there. That's Not Mum says, was originally informed of God of War plus Egret plus Persephone plus Banner into Starlit Night, which is probably the ultimate pinnacle of Persephone shenanigans. We'll get on to Starlit Night shortly. Why the God of War though? Do you need the God of War for? Oh, because of the tags. Oh my word. Yeah, I mean, I think if they're rezzing the Starlit Night there, we'll get to Starlit Night. Is Banner just a text for Endless Hunger wishes it had? 100%, Toby. You are so correct. And I always wanted like Endless Hunger 2.0, which said something more along those lines, or it would said like trash a card to stop and end the run sub. You're saying pointing out, but we're 30 minutes in, we're 5 cards in. Yeah, this was meant to be a quick recap, but also like Techie's not up yet, so we've got a little bit of time. Right, Monkey Wrench. Let's talk about Monkey Wrench. This got spoiled today. If you hadn't seen, or spoiled, it didn't get spoiled. It just got released. This was one of the new cards that came out today, and I was literally this morning kind of thinking of all the new breakers that we've got. Things like Banner, which we've just seen, which you can't boost, and Umbrella, which you can't boost. And I mean, I know we've got Turbine now, but I was kind of thinking, I wonder if they're going to print something, probably a Trojan, that maybe reduces an ice strength by 2 or something similar. And then this came out, and I was kind of happy because I just felt like I'd nailed it in terms of the guess. It said host ice gets -2 strength, and each other piece of ice protecting the server gets -1 strength. Pretty fun. It's obviously a Trojan, so like you're gonna have these issues with Trojan decks where there's always a chance that your programs just disappear because they trash the ice that it's on. But I'm pretty excited about this because I think it opens up just another way of Arasana attacking servers by kind of just making all the ice pretty meaningless, which is great. Great against Alvin says great against Glacier, absolutely. And I think really importantly, it's probably very, very good in decks. I'm trying to search for Turtle. That's hilarious. I think it's very good in Amakua decks. Probably not criminal ones, but Anarch ones. And I think that's where I'm thinking here for Monkey Wrench. I'm pretty excited to try this. Probably about a 3.5 because I think it's like my main things is I want to put in Arasana. I don't think it's the best thing that she can do though, so it's probably like a one-off maybe. But then I think it's really good in kind of turtle more Hashiko. And we've been seeing a few of these decks recently which kind of really rely on turtle. And I think that's like a deck which hasn't really lost anything by losing the bin breakers. It's lost a little bit of something because they can't like pull their backup breakers at any moment. But the kind of decks with 3 turtles, they've maybe got a couple of devil charms to just kind of get through ice at a pinch, and then maybe they play a couple of copies of, or maybe even just 3 monkey wrench. And what I will probably do is put the Shaper resource in and try and make it like really nuts and probably too janky. Captain Cody says, oh, hey, Cody, says competing with Turbine and Shaper, 100%. And I mean, ironically, like Shaper's always been the faction which kind of is usually quite good at pumping their breakers. Maybe this is like all right in a kind of Euler type deck where actually you can then make a bunch of runs like completely free. It's definitely one which I'm gonna need to play around with it before we see what it kind of can do. Yeah, Cody's really excited to see what people do with Arasana. Me too. I mean, I'm just excited to try it because I think the first thing is you stick a load of Trojans in your deck and you see what happens, and then will be the bit where you kind of narrow it down to, okay, actually no, I'm just going to try and get like 1 million clicks by running R&D and then do something silly like deep dive 3 times. Or you're kind of sort of really good early pressure with the slappy slap card. Okay, we are on to card number something. Iru, I can't pronounce this one. Eru Ayasi Pessoa. I can do the last bit. This is probably the hardest one to work out because like I'm excited to try it, but I kind of feel like I'm going to put it in decks and either not install it or install it and not use it because I still don't think that we've got the sort of the tag removal but that maybe this card needs as support. So this is like a real tricky one, and it especially like on how that kind of works. Maybe we can play this in. Okay, so here's my thinking. Here's what we can do it in. We can play it specifically, or not specifically. We can play it in other stuff, but let's put this at like a 2.5 for now. We're going to play this, or I'm going to try and play this in like probably an As deck, which runs the back, and it runs 3 times flip switch, and it runs 3 times the no free lunch, just as a way of kind of dealing with the tags. And we're going to see if getting like 2 accesses off R&D by running archives is a good thing or not, because it just might not be. But that's a way that we can potentially like deal with the tags without really paying for the tags. Plus, like then we've got a bunch of tag removal, which could actually be a pretty important thing in the set from the looks of things. Other than that, I feel like this is a card which maybe comes into its own when the rest of the set is released. You probably maybe you like put one in as a like last minute, like maybe I can whip out 2 agendas when I'm heavily tagged anyway, or I'm about to lose. Just feels a bit, unsure. I'm unsure about it. This card, I'm a bit more kind of excited to try. Thoughts on Warroid Atea? I'll have to get to that when we get to Atea, because I'm probably pretty excited about Atea anyway. And oh, hey Rob, how you doing? Yeah, we'll maybe talk about that when we get to Atea, because otherwise we might derail the Anarch section. Hannah Wheels is something that I'm actually pretty excited to try. I feel like both these abilities are like pretty decent. like clicklessly, well, not even clicklessly, gaining a click to remove a tag feels good. Checking a remote server feels good, especially if we're maybe on Turtle or if we're on things like uh, what's the card? An Aeneas Informant, for instance. Also, we can play this in Deep Dive Anarch. Nothing like splashing 10 influence of WinCon into your deck. And we can even do Deep Dive Anarch. I guess more importantly, we can do it in Startup, which like you could have done with a few options, but you're probably going to lose the deep dive on that turn. So I'm like quite interested to play Hannah Wheels, but I think she probably fits in that like 2.5. Like I want to try her, but she's not going to be one of the first cards that I test out. Although playing like some kind of Deep Dive Anarch deck definitely gets my juices going a little bit. So this is where we're up to. Okay, and then final Anarch card, I believe. This is another card which I spoiled, which I think I'm all over the place with this card. I wasn't sure. So this is Lago Paranoa Shelter. I wasn't sure about it when I first read it. I was like, this doesn't feel like it's maybe enough of an effect for kind of milling yourself out, and it's also connected to the corp installing stuff, so is that good? But I'm coming round to it more and more, and I'm wondering if Anarchs have quite as much draw as they've previously had. I think this sounds really fun in particularly in kind of startup Anarch decks where maybe especially things like Essa, where you're just trying to find, like, you just want to find your finalities and you just want to find your Chishishkas, and kind of the rest of the cards are like, yeah, they can be in there, but like most of them apart from the three botulus don't really matter. And you're normally playing like quite a bit of excess in those decks because you can't pack them too much, because you're going to lose stuff to core damage anyway, and you're possibly playing some recursion. It does seem hard to justify this without bin breakers, which is why I kind of wonder whether like this goes in more in startup decks. And yeah, Rob coming in with also, like, it makes sense in like a big Hosh deck. Essentially you're turning like Hashiko into like a mini max in a way. So I think this is like a decent Anarch card. It's like 2. It's like, I'm gonna try it, but it's a bit low, and this is in some kind of like big startup Anarch. And again, we've got like we've got big, so we've got like a few things which might enable big Anarch in startup, which could be like quite fun, I think. Kind of feel like. Okay, let's look at some Creme cards. Mercury is the first Creme card. I'm not that excited about Mercury, got to be honest. Like, I'm a big fan of Adam. I've loved playing Adam. I love the sort of real early pressure that Adam can put on, but I'm not 100% sure that Mercury has that same level of pressure that Adam has. So I'm kind of curious as to whether I'm gonna Mercury, according to Rob, is the 5th best Creme on a good day, and like, you are probably right. Like, you know, for your tournaments, you're gonna probably be playing 419, maybe Sable. If you're setting up a massive rig, then you're probably playing As, and Steve. I always like Steve for recursion. So this is an interesting one. Funnily enough, like I did realize that with a card that got released today, in fact, the next card we're going to talk about, you can play a whole rig of Mercury with stuff which is gonna kind of enable her to do a lot of bypass, but with a breaker suite, which is kind of fun. I'll maybe talk about that when I get to the next, or not the next card, but the breaker that was released today. I think Mercury, out of all the IDs which were released, and I'm quite excited to play lots of them, I think Mercury's the one I'm least interested in. And maybe that's not a surprise because I play the sort of least criminal. I think it's like a 2 out of 5 in terms of where it's going to come in. And I think if I'm playing it, I'm just playing super fast aggro. I'm probably like firing out like 3 times mad dash. I'm just playing like mad dash turn 1 wherever I can. 2 is generous. Yeah, but I still want to kind of try. It's like it's more interesting than strike fund, you know, which is just click for free or maybe get 2 for free. Like I've got there are limits. Yeah, I'm just playing like if I'm playing Mercury, I'm gonna just like try and win by turn 5, which I think is like probably the best way to play it. Something skimming. We'll stick with that. This is a pretty interesting one because I feel like this is probably not a good card, but I still really want to try it and find out that it's not a good card. I wanna, I wanna like, I think someone said like the first time that someone like exposes just a sting in HQ or the new one which gives you a tag and they can shuffle it back, like you're gonna stop playing this card because you're like, well, that was pointless. But I kind of want to play. I don't want to play it in criminal. I want to play it in like Tau or a Kiko or something, you know. Yeah, I think this is a classic 46th, 47th, and 48th card because I think if you're playing this, you probably want to play free. Like I don't think this is like a one of I drew it at the right time, I'm gonna play it. I think this is like I'm just gonna try and like know that I'm going for R&D or not. So I think this is 2.5 in terms of where it's going to sit for me here. That's not the word that I need. I need this word here. This is Creme. We're going to say 2.5 because I want to try it in Shaper. I don't want to really try it like anywhere else. I want to try it in Shaper with R&D pressure. You know, maybe like early pressure kit, for instance, early kit. And there's another. I mean, I'm going to spend all my kit influence on Creme cards here if it comes to it because we'll talk about another one in a second. Estebrado is next. This, I mean, I look at this and I see an APOC card. Obviously, it's not that. Well, it is that, but it can't be. Great APOC card right here. APOC's obviously gone, so can't do that. So I guess this is like, in my opinion, this is just a Sable deep dive card, and I'm not 100% sure that I'd see it anywhere else. Yeah, like Rob says, worse than inside job 95% of the time, and I think that's correct because I think the place where I want to use my inside jobs usually is the server. Like I don't want to get into R&D or HQ. Like maybe if you're firing off a massive wake implant like late in the game, but I just see this as a deep dive card, and because of that, it's like, to me, I see this card and I just see it in one deck, and thus I find it quite uninteresting. So I think this actually gets like a 1.5. As rough as that might sound. Maybe, no, how much influence is it? It's free influence, so we can't even really do it in deep dive shaper, but it could go into deep dive shaper, but it just goes in deep dive decks, right? Like, that's essentially it. And deep dive Sable slash shaper. But I don't think we're going to have the influence to put it in shaper, so it's almost definitely deep dive Sable and like nowhere else. I think that's like essentially all I've got to say about it, which is maybe a bit of a shame, but I think that's fine. Okay. Everyone was stoked about this card when it got sort of very gently splashed in a fan, right? Capybara. This has been described as the criminal hippo. Kind of. It's probably a fair bit worse, from my opinion, than hippo, but hippo is a bit of a pushed card anyway. I like hardware. I love decks which install a ton of hardware, but I like decks which install cards out of faction. And I feel like you can really only play this in faction. There's like one deck which you might be able to put it in out of faction, which would be a like Spark of Inspiration, Femme Fatale, Capybara deck in Shaper, obviously. But it's removed from game, which means that you can't bring it back with say the bad clone chip resource, which is called, I even talked about it, can't remember, 0 cost. But yeah, it'll come to me anyway. There's a shaper resource and it allows you to bring back hardware, but you can't bring this back because it's removed from the game. Rob thinks it's worse than Tranquilizer, which is interesting because it's kind of different to Tranquilizer. Because, well, no, I guess it is similar. Yeah, because it only does it once, right? Once the Tranquilizer's on there, then they've got to keep re-resing and all like that just becomes untenable if it's at all expensive. Whereas this is like a one-off type jobby. Maybe you can use it like in Steve with emergency shutdowns to really kind of soften up HQ. But I kind of, I only see it really in Criminal, and because of that, I'm not super excited to play it. Because I just can't see any ridiculous jank off the top of my head to do with it, outside of Spark Femme Shaper, which is maybe a deck. It's probably not a deck. I think this might get a 1. Oh, that's bad. Is it worse than Estebrado? I think I'm less excited to play it than Estebrado. That's a shame because it's got such cute art. I'm gonna put the fun deck in here. Spark Femme Shaper. Probably in Tau, just because if we're gonna like screw about with ice, we're gonna screw about with ice anyway. So good stuff. Okay. Let's move on to a criminal card that I'm actually pretty hype about. Hermes, the new console. Leela in a console, essentially. This could be a lot of fun. I think this is a lot of fun, probably more so out of faction than in faction, because as Robin Chat will probably tell you, in faction you've got Penny Shaver. So what are you doing installing anything else? I mean, I'm more of a fan of the fun stuff, so I'd be like, well, because I'm going to install a Virtuoso. But that's full influence, whereas this is free influence, and we can get our Leela trigger, which in certain matchups could be like pretty sick. There's a particular deck which I'm sure everyone has. I'm sure this has been shouted out, but this go so well in Tau, and because of that, it's going to get like a 4 because I'm really excited to actually try it. So the fun thing with Tau is that we can, if we steal an agenda, then we can swap the ice, like swap 2 pieces of ice around, and then bounce one back to hand, and we've like maybe swapped an unresed ice so that there's only an unresed ice in front of R&D. We bounce it back to hand, and then we like hammer R&D 3 times with a conduit, maybe bouncing other stuff back to hand. Like that's potentially gross. Hermes might be the only competitive Shaper card released this set. Cody coming in with the strong language there. I'm not totally sure I agree, but I'll have to think about that more when we get to the Shaper cards. You could be right. I think there's at least one card which I think is potentially very, very standard competitive worthy in the Shaper deck, in the Shaper card pool, and other stuff which will be fun and turn up. Okay, this got released today as well. Kurupira. This is the first time I'm saying this out loud. Kurupira. This is a Fractor. I kind of glanced over this earlier, pretty sort of loosely. But I've been told that it's better than I think, and maybe that's true. So it says, I need to kind of properly read this, I think. So whenever you encounter a barrier, you may spend 3 hosted power counters to bypass it. Okay, that's pretty decent. Whenever the program fully breaks a piece of ice, place 1 power counter on this program. Okay. So yeah, so maybe that is like pretty. So we can, yeah, pronunciation guide. I think we're all waiting for that one, particularly with this stat. Yeah, I guess like what are you splashing? Like if you're not, I mean nowadays obviously you're not splashing paperclip anymore. So either you're doing a kind of you're playing cleaver and some kind of ice strength reduction, or turbine or leech or something like that. Or in faction you're playing either this, or you're playing the one that gets better with installing all the cybernetics, which is a good late game breaker once you've got like a ton of cybernetics down, but is pretty awful early, like paying 3 to break however many like subs. Like if it's 1, you pay 3 credits to break it. It feels really bad. And maybe that's not a problem because you've got boomerangs and stuff like that early on, but in startup it's an issue. But I think this is probably better, right? Like being able to bypass just every now and then at a crucial time without having to spend any money, just spending the power counters, is great. You're probably always fully breaking with this anyway, like because it's barriers, so it's normally sort of end runs. And yeah, so I think this is actually pretty good, and I think probably the fun aspect of this is putting it into Shaper, as is always my answer. But let's talk about this. So this is getting like probably a 3.5 because I will try it in Creme, but I really want to try it in Shaper. I really want to try it in Padma with egrets. Or maybe Arasana with egrets, because we can play egret, we can play so it could be Arasana, because if it's Arasana we can also play flux capacitor. I think this is actually a very good capacitor. I think this is a very good charge target, which we haven't had many good charge targets since someone decided to sink a big boat. This feels like a good one because all of a sudden being able to just like bypass and envelopment feels incredible. And there's a pretty good chance that certain big barriers become a thing. Like, I could see people starting to slot things like Theros unironically and triple advancing them, because how do you deal with a 10 strength barrier nowadays? Like, you're probably, like, even with a fully built rig, you're probably paying a lot for this. So that, like, feels pretty great. This also obviously allows us to build a Mercury rig, which has like a ton of bypass. And in terms of the Mercury rig, I was also thinking, so you can now play this as your botulism poison vial fills is probably the best way to get through a Theros, or you just bank off through it and hope it's in front. So you can play Kurupira as your fractor. You could play After Image, which is in faction. You do need to import a bit of stealth into here. Worry about that later. Probably some way like leech or something like that, so you're not using your stealth apart from when you're bypassing. And then you can play bit of a favourite of mine. You can play Abigail, and you probably have to like play 3 simul chips, but maybe you should be playing simul chips anyway in Criminal for a while. And then you've actually got a rig that can like bypass, like, and you can maybe use Mercury in the later game, maybe, if you want to. It might not be the best. Like, Mercury just might be a case of like, I'm just gonna I'm gonna play a ton of bypass events, and I'm gonna use I'm gonna use the bypass boomerang mark card. But this allows you to build like a Mercury rig, which you can still get benefit out of. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, I'm more excited about this card than when I first read it. Next up is Laser Pointer. I wish if this was 2 influence, I'd be very excited by it, because this feels like a Shaper card to me. This feels like a favorite of mine from back in the day, in the form of Deus Ex. If you're not familiar with this card, this was like a card which just broke AP subroutines. It was 10 strength. It dealt with any really nasty ice at the time. Do we think the bypass build will give enough value to run Los? I think there needs to be more D-res, because we didn't actually see that much D-res, right? In this set, we saw like Capybara, and that's about it. So I think Los really wants like a ton of D-res to really work well. But maybe maybe, because there is yeah, okay, I'll get to my idea for maybe Los in a second. It's actually the next card we're going to talk about, and then we can talk about things. Okay, so Laser Pointer. I think this is cool. I'm not sure. Like, it could definitely find its way into like early pressure criminal decks which rely on turtle. But it's possibly likely to be like card 48 for the like really competitive ones. But I feel like you could slot one of these in Shaper, or into like a maybe into an Anarch, but one that was on Gachapons and things like that. But it's 3 influence. It really wants to be 2 influence, and it doesn't have a trash can, so we can't bring it back with the back. So it's like very tricky. So I'm unsure. Yeah, you like run one of these, and you could SMC it, and that's like a way of dealing with, a surprise archer or something like that. I think it kind of also depends on what ice is actually being played, and that will be the thing. The one reason to really play this, and the one really good thing about this is that it deals with startup ob decks, which are playing um, Stavka and Hafrun, and I think that is like that's the reason to slot it right now. Um, if you're fed up of losing to those decks, uh, it's just one too many influence for me to find it really interesting. So it's going to get a 2, and it's going to go in decks which are scared of Hafrun, Stavka, Ob, because it's really good at dealing with that. Okay, so Tanuki D asked about loss, and maybe this is the card which makes Los or Los. I think it's Los, right? Work, and not because of this card specifically, but this. So this is Sachi, I think Sachi, and it's a Trojan, and it's only one influence, which I like because it could be fun to splash. And it basically just gives you money if they if the ice is rezzed or derezzed. And this works with a really disgusting card. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring up just a deck list here because this is like the easiest way for me to actually find cards. Because my brain goes a bit like mushy when I'm talking, unfortunately. So there's essentially the last true bit of disgusting derez that's left in the game is Rubicon Switch. If you're not familiar with this card, it's a piece of hardware. It's free influence. It costs free, and it says X credits. Click derez a piece of ice. Res this turn. X is its printed res cost. Use this ability only once per turn. Sachi could make this playable, and I think you need to kind of have a good game plan apart from this. It's not just going to be I'm going to derez your ice and that's going to make you poor, but you want to be like running R and oh sorry, I didn't hide this, did I? This is Rubicon Switch. Should have been on screen a minute ago. So this costs a lot of money normally, but if they're rezzing a piece of ice and you gain free, and then you're day rezzing it and you gain free, and you're maybe also Los, then this is suddenly a lot of money. This is like doable. You put a Sachi on their HQ ice and you run it, and the right answer is probably for them not to res. Let alone if you're like have a flip switch installed, so if it's something really nasty you can just flip switch out, and then you're like, if they don't res then that's fine, you're running HQ 3 times and you're charging up your wake implant, or you're doing it Steve instead and you're getting all of your Steve triggers. I think there's potentially a bit of a disgusting deck here, and I think this card is probably the enabler. We might need a way of getting it back, so you might play 3 Simmel chips as well, and then as soon as they trash the ice on HQ and they put this out, then you just Simmel chip it back. Yeah, I think Seabass is right. You probably need a way of clicklessly installing it. Tanuki, you can't use Masterwork because Masterwork is just hardware. You could use Q-Loop, but you'd need to like get it onto the top of your deck somehow. Maybe you put it there with Buffer Drive, and then you install it off the Prognostic. This is one influence less than single chip as well. There is a chance that there's a really disgusting deck here where the correct answer is never resing your ice, which always feels a bit bad because it just means that your ice is useless. Because of that, this is actually going like quite high up on my list because this is also only one influence, and we can maybe do something kind of similar in other factions. So kind of tricky. Trank does the same except D-reses also. Yeah, so Tranquilizer, yes, but it doesn't give you the money. Sachi gives you 6 credits, Rob. If you assuming they res and then you D-res it with Rubicon Switch, that's 6 credits, which is probably paying for your Rubicon Switch. And then they have to re-res it again. And if you can keep them down on enough money where they can't res it multiple times in a turn, or like then you just go in and you emergency shut down it or whatever. Like I think there is actually like a dres.deck here, and I'm kind of keen to try it out just because it's uh it's it's something that hasn't been good yet, and so I want to see if it is good, and maybe it plays the birds. It probably doesn't play the birds, but maybe it plays the birds. I think it gets a 4. It probably shouldn't. I'm just weirdly excited to try it. I'm weirdly excited to try it in like Shaper, just to gain money off them resing the ice and then bouncing it back to hand. And if they don't res it, then I'm just going to run through their R&D and charge up a conduit or something along those lines. So this goes in like a Rubicon Switch deck. Birds aren't a thing anymore. That's a good point. They must have flown away because their bird handler has also gone. But there's other stuff we can play, right? Flashbang is still a card. I'm not being serious about this. This is like an unbelievable cost. Which even like gaining 6 off Sachi is not going to make this worth it. Or is it? Maybe. If we don't have to boost the strength at all, so if we're playing this in like Arasana and we've got our monkey wrench down and we've got a turbine out and we've putting, I mean, you're going to end up with like 4 Trojans on a single piece of ice, which is definitely putting all of your eggs into one very, very weak basket. So that's probably not a good idea. Okay. Next up is Shibboleth. I think this is probably actually pretty strong. I think this replaces Cat's Cradle in almost every deck. I see very little reason to play Cat's Cradle over Shibboleth. Like maybe if corpse money does become a big problem and code gates are a big thing, then the extra credit tax is something. Maybe if you're de-resing a lot of stuff, the extra credit tax is something. But I feel like being able to break Magnet for a single credit in the early game and dealing with most most code gates in the game for about 5 credits maximum early on, and installing for 1 credit just feels ridiculously good. So I'm pretty sure this goes into most good stuff Creme decks. I want to play it in kit. I want to put it into sort of I'm really keen to try it in kit, and it probably gets 3.5 because of that. It's like early pressure kit is specifically what where I kind of want it, where I want to be like slamming really early, because then once it gets to the mid game, then I can install a Unity instead, and I even get the bonus of having like extra icebreakers installed, and so Unity then starts to pump really, really efficiently. Early pressure kit, also good in deep dive kit. Potentially other deep dive shapers as well, but ones where this is fret 4, I believe, right? So we can like steal like 2 or 3 points early on, and then we're just going to try and win off a 2-click deep dive. And then the fact that the fret 4 means nothing because we've won. So they're like the 2 decks which I really want to try that in, and in particularly like they're both good startup decks and Stratup. So that's where I really see this card being particularly fun. Stick it in all your criminal decks as well. I think just take the Cradle out, put one of these in. Like Rob says, you can put an Amina in, which you can get later on. I think is like a perfectly good game plan. Okay, this was released today. First time we've seen this. Debbie Downtown Moreira. I think this is the weakest card of the whole set. This just does not feel good in any way. It's so odd. Like, I feel like if you're installing this once you're at fret 4, like this is too late to be installing a card like this, which is kind of like gonna gain some money. Like fret 4 is kind of the game's kind of over, guys. Don't install Debbie. Draw for a frickin' overclock. It's charged up by playing run events. That's cool, I guess. Like certainly in like a Ken deck or something like that. But then it's a click ability to use the credits that are on it, which means that we can't use it with a run event. I don't get it. I think it's really bad. And like it's not even, if it was one influence, then it would be a unique connection that we could maybe put in our shaper decks, you know, our Paul's Cafe decks. But yeah, this is well, I don't know. It's getting like a 0.5. Oh, that feels bad. But yeah, I just don't want to run it in anything. I don't even want to play it in. I don't think I want to play it in Ken, and I guess that's where you'd play it, right? Um, there, done. Enough said. All right, let's move on to something. Yeah, it is. You're right, Tanuki. It's like a nombo with the obvious Ken deck, because like when you are running the remote or wherever you're running, you probably want to like overclock it or something like that. You can't. I mean, maybe if you get like 10 credits on it, then it's all right. But you know, even a Ken deck probably only has like 23 maybe run events, like maybe 25 if you're like really packing them in. Yeah, why would you not just play prepaid instead? I think you would. I think you'd probably get as much or more value off a prepaid. Arasana. Let's talk about something that is exciting. I'm super hyped about two of the IDs that were released in this set. Because I think they are very much not econ IDs. They are more kind of need to do this. Yeah. Arasana, they are more like deck building IDs, which just kind of like make this problem. They're not like, it's kind of obvious what to slot. I guess in some ways Arasana is, but you run into exactly the problem which Source has run into in chat, trying to build a Arasana deck and like slots, like where do you stop putting Trojans in? How many Trojans do you put in an Arasana deck? Like how much MU do you have for all of these? Where's your kind of money for setting up coming from? But this just looks like a ton of fun. I mean, there's quite the Trojan sort of toolbox out there now. We've seen Trojans in all factions. We got an extra one today, which is not a virus, which I think is really important in terms of how Arasana's kind of the card which we've been given as her sort of econ package is going to be pretty important. That plenty of your cards aren't viruses. Yeah, Rob, you're probably not wrong, but I'm not gonna. I think Arasana is gonna be the funnest games that you'll play in any tournament will be as or against Arasana. Because like just throwing cards all over your opponent's side of the table just feels absolutely nuts. Also, just I love her style. Just look at her; she's so cool. I don't think there's maybe one card which I am more excited to play than her, but she is getting a very, very solid 5, I believe. Oh, that's a bit too big, isn't it? It's, bomb. Yeah, she's a 5. She's S tier. In terms of what decks I want to make, I don't know yet because this is like all the decks. I think I definitely want to try deep dive using the click gain Trojan. Feels like a really fun sort of option, and also it like leads her into a way where she actually has a win con. So I think that might be like the first one which I've really tried to build. And then we can just slot in some Sachis and a Rubicon Switch version. So we'll put like a Rubicon Switch, maybe. So why not? Tanuki D saying environmental testing is probably worth a couple of slots. It probably is. I was high in environmental testing when it first came out. I thought, yes, Shaper has got some econ. Then tried to play it. I found it a bit slow. Arasana could get it there because also a lot of the Trojans are very, very cheap to install. They're 0 or they're 1 with a few exceptions. So I think environmental testing probably is the card that she might need. Whether it's actually good enough, we'll have to see. Could also pump it up a bit quicker with flux capacitor as well, which again is like a good thing to put in Arasana. I think I definitely want to try a version which kind of leans a lot on poison vials, which is probably botulous. It's definitely like slap dash, slap fight, slap whatever it is. And then flux capacitors to recharge the poison vials. Along with probably 2 botuluses, depending on how much sort of influence I find and what else I actually need to spend influence on. I guess a win con would be good. It's probably conduit. But yeah, seems fun. I don't think I'm going to try and build an Aesop's version. I don't think Aesop's is the right thing for her, and I thought it was going to be when I first saw her spoiled. Less sure about that now. Right. Joyride It's a champion card, and it's so simple, and I think it might be really good, um, particularly in certain decks. I think this is a really good card in deep dive decks, because drawing 5 in a lot of decks is going to find you your deep dive, and you want to make a run on R&D anyway. So I think this is pretty good. I think if it was less influence, I'd be jamming this into like criminal decks 100% of the time. At 3 influence, I think it's probably too much to do that with. It would be interesting because recently sort of Hashiko decks have been able to spend their influence on whatever the hell they want. Maybe they've got 9 free influence to spend on 15 card draw, which, like, it's gonna catapult you early. Like, you're gonna get one hell of a start, and Hashiko can usually get through one piece of ice very, very easily with either a Bankar or with Botulus and things like that. So maybe this is like a way of getting Hashikos even faster, which, I don't think we need better Hashiko decks out there. Maybe we can find influence for this in something like Freedom, who struggles with draw, but he's less good at getting in. Maybe again like Essa, like I can kind of see it being like worth the slot in certain anarchs. It certainly looks like a lot of fun. I love the art on it as well, like the whole kind of what game was this? This was a Jet Set Radio kind of inspired things going on with this set. Joyous, I find them great. So I'm excited, even though it feels like quite a kind of basic card. Like, it's got very few things on it. I think it's like a free, in terms of how excited I am to play it. And I think this is going in Deep Dive Shaper. Probably not all other Shapers. Possibly like, I don't know, like like the type of Shapers that just tend to hammer R&D with conduits, but it's probably going in there, and I'm probably gonna try it out in certain anarchs. Maybe Essa. Especially in like startup. You also play this like with Ghost Tongue, and it's only 1 credit. 1 credit to get a run on R&D, draw 5 cards. That feels pretty good. So let's put like Ghost Tongue Essa / Big Anarch. All right. Airblade. This is a card which fully came out today. So we'd seen like pretty much all of this card. Like, just a few little bits were hidden. I think we all kind of worked out what it said. So no real surprises here. It stops net damage by using power counters. Interesting take from Rob here, saying it's the worst card in the set. And it's got a power counter. Also, you can remove power counters to prevent a when encountered ability on a piece of ice. So me and Rob have a good history of disagreeing about cards. I'll screenshot the fact that Rob says this is the worst card in the set. I think there's a slight outside chance that this ends up being like a free of tech card out of faction in a Continentals or Worlds or something winning deck list, as a like, it's going to be tech for something and it's going to do it really well. Tanuki saying it goes straight into my Az deck. Hell yeah, like Az loves this. I think this has got 2 pretty good abilities, especially
bearing in mind the amount of sort of encounter abilities that Ice has right now, and the amount of net damage out of nowhere type decks which are out there right now. So I think this could be a thing. It's only one influence and it's only one credit. And you could charge it. In Shaper, you've got various ways that you could charge this up. Like one or other of these abilities is going to be better than the other in most sort of games. Obviously, if you're against PE, being Padma, running R&D, and just always charging the prevent one net damage is going to feel pretty great. If you're against MBN, always charging that second when countered ability is going to be pretty great. But it's interesting. I think this is cheap enough in influence that if certain decks become a problem, this suddenly gets splashed everywhere. And we shall see how it does because of that. I'm not totally sure I'm like really excited to play it as such, because it's just a tech card at the end of the day. But it could also sort of allow like Mercury to do stuff by instead of breaking the net damage subroutines, taking like just paying with counters. So like it's kind of fun maybe there. It's also probably really good in our Persephone Bankar, like that this deck with Banner and Persephone and Bankar, and probably like that's a good card to be in that kind of a deck. Because if you run into any Jinteki Ice, then you're pretty set up if you can just mill them and not do any damage. Source asks, does during a run include the access step? What triggers on the access step? Yes, sorry, I think I know what you mean. So as in if you were to access a snare, then it's still during the run. So like you could use this to stop the net damage from a snare or something along those lines. I think that's what you're asking, and if so, then yes, this does counter those things. The nicest thing about this is that it's not just a forever card. It's not like I'm going to put one of these in my deck and then I don't have to worry about PE as long as I've got money, because it will run out unless you've got some pretty good ways of charging it up. This is like mid tier for me in terms of fun. It's also, this one is an interrupt. So this will, like, they do a net damage and you go no. That's what this little funky symbol is. It's an interrupt symbol. So this like goes into the Persephone deck. And it goes into Mercury as well. There we go, right there. And then it's, other than that, like, it's just a tech card, which maybe we put in if we get fed up of playing against certain ice or PE decks. How are we doing for time? It's 10 o'clock. We're nearly halfway through. Okay, like, yeah, we're doing okay. We're doing okay. We're gonna get there. Okay, Lilypad, I'm just straight up excited about. I think this is a cool console. It allows us to do some great stuff, particularly out of Arasana, where we're installing a lot of programs. I could also see this going into something like Freedom. Maybe this is for, this is obviously like Arasana, any kind of Arasana type deck, or like install Shaper, but also Freedom. It is free influence, which is like quite a lot for Freedom, and obviously it means you're not playing Nob Kari, which could be an issue. But Um, it does give you 2 MU, and it gives you draw and freedom. Like my freedom decks anyway have like a ton of programs, and they can install programs on the off turns using gachapons. So I think this is definitely worth um, a pretty big look, and I'm certainly going to be trying it in freedom as well as in shaper. Rob can't see this beating pantograph. It's tricky because pantograph does give you that credit, which can sometimes be really, really good. But the ability to potentially draw on the off turn is always something which I enjoy a lot. Living Mural is next up. This one is pretty interesting because I can only see this in 2 decks. And they're essentially, obviously, your kind of Arasana, everyone's a Trojan type deck. And then also maybe Inversificator Kit. But I do think this is like quite good. It's whether it's better than Ika, or maybe you play both. And I just can't work it out. Cody's wondering what ends up being the engine. Is it Pawn Shop or is it Urban Art? Ika is still around, Rob. Yeah. Yeah, tricky. I'm unsure if it's going to be Pawn Shop because I feel like if you're leaning on Pawn Shop, if they start just trashing their ice that's got all of your Trojans on it, your econ might fall apart a bit. And to be fair, it does mean that they're trashing all their ice, but if they're like Orb or something like that, then they're not even worried about doing that. So Living Mural is an interesting one. I think it's a 2.5. I really want to try it. I don't see it working out of faction at all, which is why I'm like slightly less interested in it because I'm only really ever going to use it in a couple of decks, and that's going to be Arisana, and it's going to be Inversificator Kit, so that I can move it around. Could be decent though. It actually gets a fair bit better. The threat, I didn't think this threat would ever come in. If you are unsure, the threat is threat 4. When you install this program, it gains +3 strength for the remainder of the turn. I didn't think that was going to be relevant, but we do have a new card which might make that relevant, so that's cool. Next up is Clickachew or Pikachu. I think this is Chow, if my Brazilian is good, which it isn't. I love this art. Like, that's just super cool. Everything about it. And this is one of the 2 cards which I'm going to disagree with Cody earlier, saying that that Hermes was probably the best shaper card. This is potentially the strongest shaper card in the set, because it does. Anytime shaper's been given the possibility of doing stuff with 1 billion clicks, someone breaks it. It's normally Rotage, and I'm sure he's got his eyes all over this sticky little thing. Yeah, no, I know you would have thrown out spicy takes. But yes, this is probably the thing that makes Arasana really interesting to me, because all of a sudden we have a win con tied into her ID, as long as we're playing something which involves additional clicks. So, for instance, if we're playing Deep Dive, which I'm sure you're all familiar with by now, but this is a run all the centrals, so that's at least 3 clicks, and then look at the top 8 cards of R&D, and if we've got an extra click, we can see a second one, and it shuffles after each time you play it, so you can then play, if you've got enough clicks, you can play a second Deep Dive. Maybe you can pull one back from the bin with Buffer Drive, and then that puts it on the top of your deck, so then you could draw it with a stone ship chart room. Like maybe we can deep dive like 3 or 4 times in a turn. That probably means we're playing 3 of these, which feels like a lot of MU, but 3 MU is pretty similar to a card called Hyperdriver, which won't show up because I haven't got my collection on all. Obviously, like the whole clause of Hyperdriver is much different, but this was a free MU card which gave you like a ton of clicks. And if we've got 3 of these out on the board, then we've kind of got a similar thing. The fact that we can install at least one on the turn clicklessly using Arasana feels great. I think this is probably this is incredibly interesting. This is like the card which I'm probably going to play around with most. It's only 2 MU, which means you could put it in other stuff if you can find you do need to have reasons to have all these clicks. But maybe you can find them. Maybe you're like running through I don't know where you get the MU for that, but I was going to say maybe you're like running a central using Chesva to break the ice for free, getting up your turtle, charging up your penny shaver, getting a click back from doing it. This is like a solid 5 for me. I'm trying this obviously just in Arisana deep dive decks. I'm trying it in startup deep dive decks in every startup faction that we have. It's got to be really potentially good in Tau, especially startup Tau, where we can move the ice that this is on around, and then we can like deep dive the next turn. Feels great. Feels like I'm gonna have a lot of fun with this. Maybe it's not as busted as I think. I kind of hope it's not because I don't want it just to get banned. And shapers generally can't have nice things. Not allowed them. This is the other thing, the other card which I think we will see in sort of competitive shaper decks, and maybe even some others. I've got some ideas for this. Slap Vandal. This is one of our fun Trojans. I've just realised it's an AI. It's got okay. Maybe that doesn't make too much. Maybe it doesn't make too much of a difference anymore because we've lost IP block. I guess Swordsman is still around. Hadn't noticed it was an AI. Now, like I say, like that might not make a difference. Like Bulwark's gone, which had an AI clause. IP block's gone, which had an AI clause. I think Swordsman is the only one, and I think that's fine. So maybe something else with an AI clause comes along, which could make this a problem. But until then, I think this is a way of shapers getting in early, which they have not had. Like you've had to. I just think it's been so unfair for so long because criminals have had boomerangs. That's a great way of getting in places. Anarchs have had Botulus, and then they got given Bankar as well. What Shaper had along those lines? I mean, they were technically the first people to like get some stuff, but they had like Kongamato. Like this is not good enough to play right now. Gabali, which I can't spell. Gabali. It's like, oh yes. I mean, how are you meant to spell these? Boat. Okay, fair enough, Rob. Shaper's got boat, and then they got boat taken away from them. So all I'm saying is that I'm just glad they got something else. And this is like a bit cheaper. This makes more sense to play in like SMC type decks, and just allows them to maybe put that pressure on really early. Like maybe you just play one of these in your deck, assuming you're on free SMC, and it just stops the corp just rushing behind an Enigma or something like that, like turn one. Maybe you play three of these and you bouncing them around and you're using poison vials, and um that's where I kind of want to play this. I'm a bit of a fan of poison vial anyway, and so anything that's in faction where I can play poison vial feels great. This is probably going to be in Arasana, obviously. First place I'm going to test it. But it's also, I think, going to be in sort of good stuff shaper. Because I think it is a good stuff, even if you just play one of it. Cool. I like Slap Handle. I think it's cool. Umbrella is a card I'm not sure about. This seems to have a lot of clauses on it, like to make it good. And if you can get all those things in a line, then yeah, it's probably pretty good. Well, Botulus probably is better, but Botulus is a whole different ball game. And it's not in faction. Yeah, I don't know about Umbrella. Like, am I playing this in Arasana? Like, I'm not sure I am, because I think the breakers which I want are gonna be like, I want ones which are good, like backup breakers, and don't rely on me having Trojans out, because if I've got Trojans out on everything, then I'm probably already winning. This feels a little bit risky to me. Like the deck I can see it in is a deck which plays. Oh, I've just remembered. So the card I was thinking of earlier, which was like bad symbol chip, which was a resource, is Reclaim. Editor's note. I can see this Umbrella, that is, being played in cards. Oh dear, in decks, and this is probably like an Arasana deck that runs 3 copies of Compile, which is a bit of a favorite card of mine. Like maybe this is the classic. It's probably not pre. I don't think you've got enough slots for prepaid, but I think Compile's a really cool card. It works quite well with a lot of the Trojans, especially if they're being trashed by the corp, by them trashing their ice. You can get them back onto a piece of ice for a run, and then they go back into your deck. And then you could Arasana them back out, like once you draw them again. That's quite cool. So I could see Umbrella working in a deck that like runs 3 copies of Compile or something similar to that. Obviously, you're probably on symbol chips as well, but specifically like Compile decks, I can see it working. I'm unsure about anything else, and I don't think I want to play this in kit, which is like the biggest. It's always the biggest downer for me if it's a shaper decoder and I don't think it's good in kit. It's like, should I be playing it anywhere? Who knows? So Umbrella, it's going to get a lukewarm reception from me, I think. We're going to go. I think it might be. Am I going to put it at a 3 and try and make it work? No, I'm going to put it at a 2, and it's going to go in 3 times Compile Arasana. I've probably spelled Arasana about 10 million ways here. Okay, this is a card that I'm excited about. I've been told it's quite bad. Don't believe you. This is Beatriz. No, it would be Beatriz. Freer Gonzalez. Yeah, Rob saying you have Unity in faction. No need to mess around with this nonsense. You also potentially have Hyperbaric, but that could be a bit of a risk if Rig Shooter becomes a thing. So Beatrice is HQ pressure for shapers, which is pretty cool. It's a double click to run HQ, but then see an additional card off R&D. So I'm immediately pretty excited. I'm always excited when I see anything that allows shapers to put pressure on other servers, because I feel that's how shaper always loses. Is that you can just ice up the remote, and what are they going to do? They don't have indexing anymore or anything like that. Like maybe you put a piece of ice on R&D just to stop them like sticking down a conduit and going, but you normally leave HQ pretty open. Same with archives, and that's why like maybe if some tag removal that shaper could import comes in, then we could start putting Iru Ayase Pessoa Anarch connection in. Oh, I should have said this actually. I will say that the other deck that I want to put Eru in is Tau. Kind of obviously. I don't know what we're doing about the tags, but I'll deal with that later. Badge is tag tech, but it's tag tech which happens at the start of your turn, which makes it really bad if you're trying to stop a resource being trashed. I think it's a problem. Hey, Augustus Caesar, how you doing? You probably didn't miss anything incredibly spicy, apart from me saying that maybe Airblade wins Worlds. That's quite spicy. I don't think I've got to the cards which I think are going to be banned yet, but I think there are some. Beatrice is maybe my spiciest one, because the first place I want to play this isn't Shaper. It's actually a Steve deck. I did also decide that I'm probably building a Persephone deck, but you just have to wait for that one. So this looks pretty good in Steve, right? This is like, as long as you're doing something about their ice on HQ and you're getting through that reasonably cheap, you're getting your Steve trigger, you're getting to see R&D instead, you're charging up a wake. Like, is that not a bit nuts? That feels really good. Like, really good. And, you know, you can put a lot of pressure on here with Steve. And like, they're going to end up with, like, 5 pieces of ice on HQ. And then, I don't know, you do something ridiculous like Chisel Charm them, or you emergency shutdown and en passant them, or something kind of crazy, or you keep de-resing them, or yeah, I know HQ's already stacked, but like they're gonna need to make it really stacked for you not to get in. You know, maybe you play this is still legal, right? Yeah, you play Maui. This is 2 MU. We're possibly going to need some more MU. And then all of a sudden, like you like, so this is 2 MU. So this is going to give you a ton of credits. You'll also have 2 MU, so you can play all 3 Shesva. Can they actually, like, can they make HQ expensive for you to run? Yeah, Augustus Caesar saying you just then stick down a Sneak Door as well. You possibly do play this and Sneak Door. Like, this is a lot of pressure in Steve. So I'm like, oh, I did it again, didn't I? I didn't show you my screen when I was like doing the things. This is the card which I was looking at. Maui. Yeah, it costs 5, I know. But 2 MU and a bunch of free credits for running HQ, and we can turn those credits into twin encounters, and then we can use Beatrice to use those twin encounters on R&D whilst we're also charging up our wake. That's nuts. That's like insane. Jack Twist says, casually listening while cleaning up the kitchen, then heard, you play Maui. Jack Twist is just checking that I'm okay. Yeah, I'm being like 70% serious. Steve plus Wake plus Twinning. Like I think this is that just feels like a nuts deck to me. That feels like kind of crazy. Obviously I want to put it into Tau because anytime that we want people like moving like having to ice up all their centrals, like Tau feels great. Um, I'm not sure if it. Oh, and there's one other deck that it definitely finds its way into, which is Akiko. Okay, that's not how you spell Akiko. Akiko. Um, this does trigger Akiko, and I did double check on this one because uh, Akiko is on breach, and so we can like get our Akiko trigger from running HQ. I'm all about it. And any shaper which plays Wake, and I think Wake is like quite good in shaper as it is. I think this is really good. Um, I will be proven wrong, but until I'm proven wrong, this is 4.5 on the me looking forward to playing it scale. Um, Absolutely solid card. Can't wait. Can't wait to try this one out. Okay, I think final shaper card. Um, Am I going to get through the corpse tonight? Probably not. We might have to skip to some pretty specific corp cards because I've got certain takes on some of them. Last shaper card is Urban Art Vernissage. This is obviously the engine which makes Arasana's decks work, but it also adds some massive utility to Trojans, which was a big issue which they had before. So it's one of the cards I'm most excited about because I've always been a fan of Trojans, but like once you've had an eco get stuck on a magnet and you can't do anything about it unless you like use a simul chip or I don't know, you're doing something ridiculous, then you feel pretty bad about Trojans all of a sudden. And this is the card. This is also the card which just stops magnet being like absolutely ruinous for all uh, kind of Trojan based decks, but it allows us to do some stuff out of faction as well. Um, there's cards like Hush, which is a really strong card, I think, in any deck, but which could already move itself around. So a little bit less. Yeah, I think Hush is a free of in Arizona. I think Hush might be a free of in every deck, but we'll maybe see. Um, but in Anarch, like we can technically use it with Hush. We can move around our new monkey wrenches, um, which could be like a really good use of these. So I can see this in Anarch, and then we can play some of the one cost Trojans alongside it. So we can play everyone's favorite Kaioban, which is only one cost. It's like pretty nuts. This is really good with Bankar because it fires off it, even though you don't break anything. Excellent stuff. Do they just trash the ice that it's on? Probably. But if they don't, then this allows us to move it around. And these are only 2 influence, and we can potentially play all 3 of them. Can't wait. Can't wait to play this in Anarch. I can't wait to try this maybe in Criminal. Probably with Saucy. Is it Saucy? Did we decide it's Saucy? The like if you res it, if you de-res it, gain free. Maybe again we're playing Cubans because if we're running through the ice for free, or for like maybe even a probably not a profit anymore because like Bagolta's gone. This feels great. This feels really fun. I don't think it's going to be super super competitive, but in terms of cards which I'm excited to play, this is a 5. This is S tier. I'm The question is going to be how many of them do you put in your deck, and the answer is 3. Certainly for me, it is not unique. Pharos, you're on it. It is not unique. You can get all 3 of these down, and then all of a sudden you bring one Trojan back to your deck, to your hand, and you have 6 credits to spend on stuff. You know what costs 6 credits? A load of really expensive stuff in Shaper, like Inversificator. If you're putting this down for free, and then you're moving stuff around which has Trojans on it, then so all of a sudden you've kind of got a deck going on there. Maybe you're playing like liberated accounts so that you can like make actual money, like turn that sort of money into free money. This could be like real good. It might not be. I just hope it is. What decks am I putting this into? I'm putting this into Arasana. Like, I mean, I kind of don't need to state the obvious there, but I'm going to try this in Anarch with Hush and Monkey Wrench, and Creme decks with Saucy Sack. Can't pronounce it. Hard to turn it into more than a perpetual motion machine with little actual output. Exactly. That is exactly the kind of econ that I love to play around, Rob. I love having to really work hard for my econ. Why I like Shaper. Are we sure the money affects stack? Change this asking. As in, would they not stack? Are you wondering if you could get like 2 off this card, 2 off it? No, you could definitely do that. Why would they not stack? Like, surely they would. Surely, can you return 1 Trojan and gain 6? I don't see why you couldn't. When your turn begins, you may add 1 installed non-virus program to your grip. If you do, place 2 credits on this resource. So if you return 1 to your hand and you've got 3 of these out, then you put 2 credits on each of them. So we gain 6. Right? You may add 1 installed non-virus program to your grip. If you do, place 2 on this resource. This resource. Is that the issue? That might be the issue. Need to check. Okay. Don't quote me on any of these rules. I do not know rules very well. So wait for like, I don't know, Jamie to make a ruling on this, or someone to try and play 3 copies of this at APAC, and then we'll work out what happens then. Someone's going to play 3 copies of this at APAC. There's lots of Shaper players there. And we'll see what they rule then. But still putting 3 of them in my deck because I want to find it like turn 1, right? Yeah, I think you might be right. I think they might not stack, which is actually really sad. Anyway, last runner card. I think it's a bit boring. I'm like, it's fine. It's like perfectly fine. By higher bands, it's like so, isn't it? Like none of it's boring as such, but I'm as excited to put it in my decks as I was to put in deuces. And you know, I put deuces in decks, but I wasn't like, oh, look at all the fun stuff I'm gonna be doing. Yeah, nooses wild is what this is. It's fine. It goes in decks. That's it, isn't it? Really. I think that's where we got to. Right. I'm going to speed things up now, probably by just looking at the cards which were released maybe today, because I think they're the things which I've got the most to talk about. And otherwise I'm going to be here till like past midnight. It is also a lot worse because it does need a run, and not just a run, a successful run for the stuff to sort of go off. And yeah, I'm unsure about it. So salvo testing is the 5-3 agenda, which we all kind of expected it to be. When you score an agenda, including this one, you may do 1 court damage. Classic. Oh, sorry. It's a classic or deck building chance of uh, um, point number one, score a 5-3, point number two, win the game type thing. How you score in 5-3, who knows? But you know the deck which this goes in, which is already like potentially disgusting, and I haven't like luckily made really competitive yet, is Mitosis Fool or Mitosis Tule, however you want to pronounce it. Because this is something which you have to find before they find, but then you have to run the stuff, and you might run into a overwriter. Pretty gross. I like it as an agenda. I think this is where 5-3 should be. I don't think they should be sort of big on the defensive side, but I think they should have solid offensive abilities. If you've managed to score a 5-3, it should do something. This is, I'm happy with it because of that. I don't know if I think it's particularly great. I don't know how I'm ever scoring one of these out, and as such, it's like not super interesting to me. And I don't know if I want to play any more Mitosis Fool, because I found the deck was either really disgusting to play against or just lost. So, but I think that's the deck that it instantly fits in, and possibly some other stuff. Probably some like MCAA type Fule decks. We saw Stegodon MK4. This is a 3-1 agenda, and I'm really excited about this agenda purely for playing in Ocarina tournaments. If you're not familiar with Ocarina, it is an alternate format made by Sanjay, where you can play as either an identity or you can play as no, not as an identity, sorry, as a connection, or you play as an agenda as your ID. And like this is like a really fun thing to build around if this is your ID has this text. I don't know if anyone's scoring this. Like Rob says, it works with harmonics. That's good. I don't know if it works with enough else. Like I don't know if that's enough of a reason. Potentially, like if Hush wasn't a thing, then you could end up making. Oh no, because now there's Banner as well. I was gonna say you could end up making like Echo like really, really taxing when it's got like a million subroutines. But that's the only one which you really want to res and de-res a million times. Like Pulse is okay on the res as a click taxing thing, but it doesn't like scale into the late game as Echo does. But as soon as you put a Hush on the Echo, or they install a Banner or something, then you're buggered. Magna is a decent D-res target, but I feel like it's potentially got slightly worse now, but only slightly. Yeah, I think I'm going to put a 4 for Ocarina because I want to build an Ocarina deck around this. I don't know if I managed to build a deck around this otherwise. Super quick thoughts on these. Wage Workers is nuts. Can't wait to play with this. It's just Jeeves, isn't it? But slightly different, and you can do that in startup now. That looks fun. This got spoiled today, came out today. This seems to be a bad HB barrier. I am unsure about this card. It's got an on-res, which is only once it's at fret, which is fret 3. When you res this ice during a run against this server, you may install one non-agenda card from HQ or archives in the route of or protecting another server. Maybe we see this in the Jinteki ID if they haven't got a barrier breaker down, and then you could. Yeah, good for the new Jinteki ID. This looks awful. Like, and it's it's 1 strength and it's 1 sub, and it only does stuff when it's fret 3. I guess it only costs 2. I'm I am. I forgot to show the screen, didn't I? Is this? Oh, sorry about that. But yeah, no, I don't think it's good. It's like going HB1. I just don't. I think maybe we play it in Atea, and we'll see. Okay. Yeah, the bouncy ice is good. Jaguandi, I can't wait to play. This looks kind of sick. This could be disgusting. This could be great in R plus. I'm just going to put that in straight away, especially in because we'll get to another card in a second. I want to play this in startup R plus, and you're going to hear that phrase a few times. Maybe standard R plus as well. I think this is. It just feels like a really potentially mean face check. It's got great art. Katchen, I think, yeah, did this art. Mean face check, and it scales into the late game with the threat ability. Feels great. Mick, I'm probably most interested in possibly playing this in OB, especially startup OB. Again, I'm going to try and move at a rate of knots here. So I'm very interested in playing it in startup OB. I'm not sure I'm that interested in playing it in other options because I'm not totally sure it's like quite expensive. But anyway, there we go. Grease in the palm is fine. I think it could become a Jinteki fast advance card, which feels mental. And I'll get to exactly why in a second. But yeah, the whole tag removal it's like you do want to be able to land the tags, and I feel like the card to land tags with is still yet to come. So I'm unsure about this one yet. Like, I'll get to it. Bovo looks cool. I'll definitely try him out. Maybe he's fine. I think he's like a 2.5. You know, like gonna try, but I'm not gonna build much around him. Atea, I am super excited about. This is like anytime they create an ID which is just a completely new thing, um, like no one knows how to build this yet. No one knows there's a load of ideas of what we could possibly do for it. There's definitely some fast advance shenanigans. There's some like timely public release shenanigans. We've been kind of found out there's Warroid. Yes, you can play this with Warroid, and that probably is a thing. We found out like recently that swapping now counts as an install as long as you've installed a card using the swap ability, which means that maybe we even play like this could be the deck that Project Yagiuda goes in as something which you actually want to over advance. Like, that's nuts. Jinteki Project 3-2s have always been awful, and you never over advance them as a rule, and we're breaking that rule. Maybe like that's cool. That's like exciting enough. Apparently Daruma might be a card again. It won't be. I've tried it so many times. Daruma's always terrible. But maybe Daruma could be a card. Anyway, there's some like bonkers stuff that you can do here. Even like you could just play Audacity and Moonpool, and this is probably pretty good. Although you do lose the 2-0, which I think would have been like the best thing to do with Moonpools. Yeah. I'm just excited to try and build stuff in here. I don't have exact set decks in mind yet. I just want to put some stuff together and try it out because I just have. It's going to be a thing where you just have to play some games and see what happens. See if it feels like it has like enough money to do the stuff that you want to do. Okay. Foodie asset retrieval, I just fully like as an idea. Like, get rid of Oboe, put this back in. This feels far more fair. It feels like the games are going to be far less grindy. So I'm all for it. I'm not particularly excited to play it, apart from specifically in Neurospike decks. And I do like Neurospike decks, so for that reason, kind of excited. Front Company is very interesting. I'm not sure that it's like I'm not sure I'm gonna spend a lot of time working on it because I think there's better things that I could be spending my time playing around with. But I'll definitely keep an eye on this, and if I can think of some way of like making it a bit more broken, then I'm sure we'll do that. Like, maybe we do play Front Company and we play that, and maybe that's the Warroid deck, so they have to run somewhere else first, and then do they go and trash this, and if so, do they deal with the Warroid tracker, like blah 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 blah. Atini is fine. We're gonna get onto that now. It's DNA but worse, so not much to say there. But then we have this card, Bonutria. Bonutria. Pretty cool art. This feels bonkers. Does this feel bonkers to anyone else? This is the card that I think is going to get banned, or like maybe not banned, but it's gonna get some people's hackles up. This is gonna piss some people right off. So if you haven't seen this, which came out today, it's a Sentry. It costs 4 to res. It's 2 strength, but I don't think any of that matters. It's got 2 stubs, which do matter. They say do 1 net damage, do 1 net damage. Okay. And then it has an ability which says when the runner passes this ice, if there are 4 or more cards in the grip, give them 1 tag. Now, typically in most Jinteki decks, you play around the fact that you kind of don't want to have not many cards in your hand, because you might run into, for instance, a snare, which means that you need to have at least 3 cards in your hand. And to be like really safe, especially if the corp has scored a House of Knives, for instance, then you need to run with at least 4 cards in your hand. This is then going to give you a tag. And this is like maybe one of the best like unavoidable tag cards there is, because this also gives you that tag on the face check. If you run into this, it's pretty likely that you're going to get 2 nate damage unless you can deal with it. And then you're going to have less than 4 cards in hand unless you ran with 6. So you're going to also get a tag there. So this is like a pretty impressive face check. It's essentially almost the same face check as a snare, right? It costs you 4. And it does 2 damage in attack, whereas snare does 3 damage in attack. And the fact that we've now got so much more tag kind of punishment, and especially in faction tag punishment now, makes this very scary. And the biggest place where it's really scary is R+. This is 2 influence, which means you can splash 3 of them into R+ quite easily. You can splash 3 of these plus 3 snare into R+ if you want. Then you always have to run with like a certain number of you always have to run with exactly 3 cards in hand. How do you do that? How do you always run with exactly 3? Like, you have to also run like first click in case they do something which affects your hand size. It only tags you if you don't take the damage. Run past this ice. If there are 4 or more cards in the grip, give them one. Yeah. So assuming like as a face check, yes, it will only tag them if they don't take the damage. But at later points when you're like you can't always. It's really hard to have the exactly 3 cards in hand, which is kind of what you're going to need to not get tagged from this. And without that, it starts to become really taxing. And just like bonkers good in R plus. You play 3 of these, you play 3 snare in R plus, and you are essentially telling the runner that they kind of always need to run with exactly 3 cards in hand, and then you've always got the chance of rezzing an unsmiling Serevna, which if they do the 2 net damage, then they've got 4 less than 4 in hand, and they're either going to hit this, or they're going to hit a snare, or they're going to just take a tag off it. Like, this feels bonkers. The things that you can do with this, and especially in R plus. I mean, in various Jinteki IDs, fine, but in R plus, this feels bonkers good. Tanuki D, I assume the tech fires even if it's hippoed. I don't think it would, because it would. This is on pass, like this is when the runner passes, and so the hippo would kill it. Yeah. Theos saying the same. Like essentially, the hippo kills it whilst the encounter happens, so they haven't passed it at that point. And then if it's face down, if it's like not on the board, then its text isn't relevant. But this is like a really good reason to play 3 copies of Hush in every single one of your decks, especially in startup right now. Like this ice feels very, very good. And also like I have a lot of potential decks that I want to play this in. What card number is this? And I'll try and put it in the right place. 43. I also think this is like potentially really good in Jinteki. Not Jinteki, sorry, in Wayland. Wayland currently and even today got more stuff which like can be a big problem if you have low hand size. You've got urban renewals, and you've got the hostile architecture, and you've got a new upgrade today. You don't really want to be taking tags against Wayland. So again, like having to have this exact hand size feels really, really hard, really taxing. This is going to make people very angry. Lots of decks, but particularly R plus, some kind of Argus-esque Wayland, and probably some like tag. I mean, it's probably really good in PE. Quite a few cards often are good in PE, but there we go. I don't think I want to play it in PE because I just don't know if I want to build PE right now. But you could do. It's probably good in it. So yeah, this is where we've got to. Okay. Bonkers good card. Small ball here, little bouncy barrier. I think is really, really good. I think it's great in Ag Infusion. I think this card is probably really good in Ag Infusion. Oh, here's the other thing I was thinking of with this. So especially in R plus, you can play. Is this still a card, or has this rotated? This is still a card. This is still a card. Sorry, I've gone straight back to but we can just play Data Loop into Fenetria, right? How is this not like disgusting? This even has like an additional sub if they're tagged, so it's kind of good in R plus. You have to have a lot of hushes to deal with both of these cards. Um, yeah, this feels great. This would be really good in both R plus. It would also be really good um in Ag Infusion, where we can potentially boop them and make them run through the data loop a second time. Yeah, disgusting. Um, Back to talking about Ag Infusion. So Tattoo Bowler, I think, is amazing Ag Infusion Ice. I'm not sure it's amazing elsewhere. It's good elsewhere, but that's kind of as good as it gets. And then Mindscaping, I'm now a lot more excited to play. I think this could be a very upsetting card for some people. Um, it makes mitosis PE a thing again because you can play Checkers Scions and then all of a sudden they're like a big issue. Oh, in startup, sorry, like you can play Cerebrals if you're playing standard, but in startup you can play Checkers Scion, mitosis PE, and then you can just mindscape and you don't need to import end of the line anymore. Disgusting. Definitely going to play, like, if I'm going to play PE, I'm going to be playing Mitosis PE in startup. Uh, Adrian Seiss looks a lot of fun. It's got a lot of text on it. I won't remember exactly what it does. I think there's sometimes where you actually want to lose the side game, which makes him really interesting because then they can't trash him. And sometimes you don't care about them accessing the card that they're accessing. Like, I think he is like nutty, and I love these sysops which move around servers. Like, that feels fun. 4 influence is a big amount to splash in anything else that's not Jinteki, but I'm excited to play around with him a bit. Um, and Daniela, I think, is like pretty busted good. I think she could be a real big issue, especially in OB. You can pull her with a Mavirus, and suddenly the City Works, which they're accessing, does 4 net damage or meat damage, and they can't steal it. Ooh, that's pretty mean. Yeah, the fact that she's got this trash cost as well of 2 cards, I think is really nice because um it's where Ben Musashi really fell down as a card. Uh, the fact that they'd just trashed for Ben Musashi and then they'd come back. Whereas now you haven't really got that option. Also, Daniela could be pretty nasty alongside Hostile Architecture. And again, this is probably an ob deck, um, but this is like a lot of cards from hand. It's a lot of cards from hand. If you're losing 2 to Hostile Architecture and you're moving 2 to the bottom of your stack with Daniela. Okay. Epiphany Analytica. Haven't got a clue. I'm excited to try it, but I don't know what it's doing yet. So I can't really work it out. I'm going to need to play this ID a good few times and build some decks and just see how the ability feels because I have no idea how this one's going to feel and how powerful that ability is going to feel when people do start trashing stuff, which I think they're going to just do turn 1, right? So, yeah, be interesting. I think there's probably a pretty busted deck in there somewhere, but I don't think I'm going to be the one to find it, so that's fine. Oracle Think Tank is amazing in R+. And I don't know if it's great anywhere else, but again, like R+ gets a lot of potential support with this set. Balanced coverage is probably really good in Analytica and probably nowhere else. I don't think. Maybe you play it in NEH, but you probably don't. I'd have to like work out exactly what you're doing with DBS and if there's anything there. Uh, but yeah, I don't think so. Behold is fun. Giving 2 tags is fun. Again, it's probably pretty good in R plus. Does it go elsewhere? There is like some funky stuff that you can do with a ganked in ob using one of these, and but it's probably better to just use a snare. Balanced coverage in Hyobu. Unfortunately, the answer is never Hyobu. Like as much as also no, I can't even remember if Hyobu lets you see the top of yours. I don't think so. I think they tried and failed with Hyobu in a big way, but there we go. Federal fundraising is like a must trash, I'm pretty sure. So like this goes into any yellowy asset spam decks and probably gets tried in various other decks like Asa. I could see Asa using this and maybe protecting it with an upgrade instead of ice. Our good old friend the Warroid Tracker or something similar to that. Starlit Night. I don't know if this was released today or I just missed it, but I'm sure there was discussion of it before. I think this is. Haven't seen much talk about it. I think it's probably being slept on. I think as a sort of late game. This is so basically like let's try and put this together. So firstly, this has got a face check, so that's great. It potentially gives the runner 2 tags, and it's 2 separate subroutines, which makes it better against Bankar and it makes it better against Botulus. And then it's got an end game, kind of late game feel where it suddenly gets end runs. So if a runner suddenly goes tag me against this, short of having something like a banner out, this could really scale up pretty nastily. It is 5 cost, but in R plus, like maybe you're getting your 2 back from that first tag, and it's a relevant enough face check, and it's good in the late game. I think this might be quite good. I'm not sure, but I think this might be quite good. Again, it's like it's probably an R plus deck. It's probably an R plus card or a. Oh, it's also really good in Mad decks, isn't it? It's really good in Mad decks. So Mad deck, especially like Mad, as in mutually assured destruction, NEH is what I'm thinking about in particular, because I played a lot of mutually assured destruction NEH, and what happens is you get to the turn where you mutually assured destruction them, you give them like a ton of tags, and then all of a sudden your ice kind of means nothing because it was like turnpikes and IP blocks and things like that. And I guess like IP block was like reasonable. But the runner just goes ham and tries to win that turn, which they often do because you've kind of ripped up most of your board. If you've got these on the centrals and then you mutually assured destruction them, then they get better, a lot better. And assuming by that point, if you're playing a mutually assured destruction, you're going to be at threat 4. Like most of the time, you're going to be at threat 4. I think this is really good in particularly startup mutually assured destruction decks, and there's probably going to be some of them, and maybe even in standard ones because MAD is probably a lot better now that Misdirection is not around. We shall see. I think this is like maybe a bit of a sleeper card. Whereas this next card, again, it's incredible R plus support. I think this has been massively slept on. This didn't really get talked about. Virtual Service Agent. It says whenever a runner passes this ice after encountering it, if they did not break its printed subroutine with a decoder during that encounter, give them 1 tag. runner loses 1. Sub's pretty rubbish, but a lot of the time this is going to give them a tag. As an early game, your resin is in R plus for free, unless they happen to literally like turn 1 or turn 2 install their decoder, which is not particularly common. This gets really good if you're doing like rig shooter, because you just trash their decoders. And like, yeah, like it doesn't matter that you get your decoder trashed. You've got other ways, you've got your other options for getting through ice. But all of a sudden, every time you run into one of these, it gives you a tag. You're going to have a ton of tags before too long. I'm playing this particular card, and we're going to add this one to the official list here. In rig shooter R plus, like 100%. Let's add that in here. What card number are you? You are card number 54. We've skipped a lot. Or we haven't skipped it. We've just like, moved on fast. This is like a 4.5 for me. I think this is secretly pretty great. Rig shooter R plus. Sick. Okay. Oppo research. I'm probably not going to talk about it. It's going to be what it's going to be. And I think the one deck which probably benefits massively from Oppo research as opposed to hard hitting news is Fule and other kind of decks which wanted to tag you but were not rich. Or certainly couldn't outcredit you. If you maybe install advanced Oppo research, even if you're just giving them 2 tags in Fule, you're probably scoring that agenda next turn, or they're taking at least 1 core. It's quite hard to clear 2 tags and run and do, I think Oppo research, its biggest bonus over hard hitting news is that it's really good in Fule, and I don't know how I feel about that. Your digital life is an econ card, and thus it gets a 1. It's fine. I'll put it in some decks, probably. Slash and burn agriculture is pretty interesting, but I'm still unsure about this one. And I'm unsure whether like this goes in decks where you just like stick all of your first ice on archives and then you try and fast advance with audacities and slash and burns as fast as you can, or whether you're just like using this to score out your last 3-2, or whether you are trying to hold it in, whether maybe this goes in like really fast BTL decks along with red levels, so you can install your spin doctor and then slash and burn, and then you can always pull it back. It definitely feels like a lot of fun. I definitely want to try it. I'm excited to try it. I don't know how good it's going to be though. Next up is Cyber Sand Harvester, and I said a lot about this on Daily Cast. I'm super stoked to try this. This does a ton of stuff in Ob, like a ton of stuff. Instant trash 2 Costa to get 1 Costas is mental. Theos saying that the agriculture just feels redundant. Yeah, it could have just been called Slash and Burn, right? Probably. I'm not gonna go against your opinion there, because I think you might be right. Yeah, this is like, I'll add this to the sheet because this is like a 5, just in terms of like what can we do with this in Ob. A ton of things, so many things, and probably too many things that I'm gonna get a bit like waylaid with it. This is like a 5, and this is Ob. Scarcity could have just been called scarcity. Okay, tree line. I'm not sure about. Um, I like the fact that we can use this on Feroses, and I like the fact that we can use it on Akets, which are 2 ice, which I really want to triple advance. But I don't like the fact that that means I'm playing like 9 to 12 barriers. That seems bad. In startup, if you're playing Feroses, I think you definitely play these. But I don't know if Pharos isn't as good in startup as it is in standard, ironically, because you've still got boat in startup. I'm unsure about Treeline. I don't think I'm super excited about it, but maybe I do like BTL, and BTL loves advancements, and so maybe we just try and score like a massive atlas with like 1,000,000 counters on it. Maybe that is the thing to do. Valentau, I'm really excited to try purely because I want to play Fast Advance Wayland in startup, and this allows us to play regulatory captures. That's the only reason I want to play it, really. This is probably the second worst card in the set. I think this is terrible. Armed asset protection. I think this is a very low floor of gaining 2 credits. Oh, gaining 1 credit, I guess. No, you must have at least 1 face-up card in archives, because this one would count itself. Not sure if it would. Unless you have an agenda, face-up in archives, which at the moment is basically slash and burn, or they've run an SDS and weren't able to steal it. This is really bad econ. Sorry, that's like a 1 out of 5. Pivot, which got shown today for the first time in all its glory. Very similar to a card we all know and love / hate, but I really like the fact that they've added threat on here. I'm not excited to try this because it's a card that we've seen before. I like the fact that it's trashable now, though. I think that's like pretty good. It does cost a bit less to play as well. I think Consulting Visit used to be 2 or maybe 3. This could lead to some. It's only 2 influence as well. It's probably good in R+. And I think, is this nearly the last card in the set? Because we're very nearly there. And I think this is the other card. This is the card outside of the Jinteki Ice. This might be the one which gets people the angriest the quickest. Angelique Garza Correa. Again, first time I'm saying that. This is really good in obdecks, the sort of Arctic type obdecks, which just want to do a ton of damage. It's really good if you've got hostile architecture out, because if they then trash it, you're kind of doing 4 meat damage in 1 turn. That feels great. It's really good in PE as much as it is free influence. The emphasis is on the E in Korea. I don't think that helped me. I'm sorry. Hopefully Ginevra will put out a guide. She did it before. Please, Ginevra. We need we need symbols which tell us how to say these names. Yeah, I think this is like a bit busted, maybe. The fact that she also has this threat-free expendable ability, which is just to do a meat damage. This is also a meat damage. Now, there's a really important card, and it's important in Ob, and it's a card that we haven't seen for a while, really. But Reconstruction Contract gains counters when you play a meat damage, and then you can do some pretty nutty stuff in Ob using Rikoko. If you're not familiar, you can like pull it as they have agreed to access, and thus pull out a advanceable trap with the advancement still on it. And if they don't do that, then you can pull out a clearinghouse at the start of your turn and pop that and maybe kill them. But it's been quite hard to charge these up. Angelique could make that possible. This is like could be a counter because we can just trash one of these to suddenly do a meat damage kind of out of nowhere. This doesn't need any other ability apart from it being at threat free, which is a thing. And then we can use this alongside. So this is where. No, actually, I need to read it. We need to go back. We need to go back to here. Okay, no, this does say that you can advance. Okay, so we can't use slash and burn to advance our Rokokos. So maybe it's a little bit more fair than I thought. But being able to like potentially in some kind of there might be like a Rococo version of the Arctic Sun lists, which could get a bit mean. I think it's a puzzle which is maybe a little bit more complex than certainly my brain power at like 11 o'clock at night is able to deal with. But we might get there. I think this is like potentially broken good. It's gonna get banned. It won't get banned, but it'll get it'll make people upset. Takana is a card I'm really excited to play with, but I think it's going to be a bit bad because of its trash cost of 1. Remote server only makes it a bit less fun. I don't know if I realised that when I first looked at it, and I thought this could be really fun I guess it would only work because it's when an agenda is scored or stolen from there, so that's fine. There's definitely some sort of funky stuff that you can do with this, and it maybe allows you to play sort of those spicy one of ice like Loki, because everyone loves playing against Loki decks. Looks fun. We can do some on-res stuff with this as well, which is like nutty. And finally, B1001, who I wasn't too hot on until the new Jincheki Century came out. And all of a sudden, there is an Atea B1001 Phonetica deck out there, which is just going to be incredibly click taxing to deal with, because you're going to have to deal with the B1001 before you run through the Phonetica, because otherwise they're just going to end the run. Like, this could be the Atea deck. It's probably not the best Atea deck, but it could be like a really mean version of the Atea deck, which just comes out of nowhere. And might be the best use of B1001. Maybe Jaguandi in Asa is the other place where you really see this. It's pretty funky. I don't know if it's particularly strong, but there's definitely now some decks out there. And I think that's all the cards. We didn't get to play any games, but we wouldn't have had any time to anyway. I've been through all the cards. I filled in half of my spreadsheet here. I will fill in the rest of it, and maybe post a link to it once it looks nice and pretty. Thank you everyone for chiming in with your opinions as well today, because I was just excited to go through and talk about everything that's there. I hope I've given you maybe some dumb ideas to play around with. I've given myself some in the meantime. But for now, until cards are up on JNet, which doesn't appear to be yet, I think we're going to call it for the night. I look forward to seeing what people make. Good luck if you're playing in APAC next week. Good luck if you're judging APAC next week. My word. I do not envy you. I think I'm playing in the Europe and Africa Continentals in a few weeks' time. And until then, well, until next week anyway, I hope you all have a good one. Enjoy some deck building on Netrunner DB. Enjoy playing with some new cards. And ciao for now.